Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again for another great podcast. Can you believe it's fourth quarter? I'm telling you, we've really got to get our plans in place because the end of the year is going to be here before you know it. But the thing is, we like bringing you different guests because they bring different viewpoints. And today, I think you're really going to enjoy our guest. Joe Pomeroy learned the hard way that helping lead an 8-figure business means nothing if your family is walking out the door. So he spent years studying family relationships and discovered a secret that would change his family forever. Now his 3D family framework has become the new way of business-minded men are becoming an expert husbands and world-class dads. Now, I am excited to dig into this conversation with Joe. So welcome, Joe, to the Charge Podcast.
Thank you, Gary. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it is so great to hear what you're doing. I got to do a little bit of research ahead, but I want you to share it from your side of it, because what made that change for Joe to be able to make that change and say, my story needs to be different than the route that I was headed down?
Yeah, I love that question. And it's such an important one, especially when we look at what's going on in the world around us right now. I truly believe that family is the core unit of society. We save the family, we save the world. But I didn't always believe that, or at least I didn't always understand what that meant to me. I grew up with this. I created this story, this idea that you could choose between family or you could choose between financial success, but you couldn't have both. And it wasn't until my early 30s, until I had some of these pivotal moments, that I realized the lie that is. And there's a lot of lies that we, especially as men, especially as fathers, but as parents and leaders of our families in general, that we need to kind of reprogram. So I define being a provider by the roof I put over my family's head, by the food I put on the table, and by the toys or basically all this external stuff. All this stuff that I could go grab something from outside and I could bring it home and go, look what a great provider I am, and just feel awesome and amazing. Right. And, and then when family got hard, like I hit and I went, oh, well, you know what? This is hard. This is uncomfortable, but business is easy. So I'm just going to go into business. Because I tell you, Gary, that's what being a provider is. It's bringing home the bacon. And so I just pulled away, but I pulled in a way that was fully justified. And I focused on business. And then I came home and things with my wife and I were broken. And I didn't realize because I'd been hiding. I thought we were fine. Right. And this one night, and I share this story a lot, and people can get access to this on my website and things like that. So I don't want to take up time here doing it. Basically, my wife and I got in a big argument about nothing. And it led to me getting injured and bleeding and her headed out the door. And I realized that things weren't anywhere close to as fine as I thought they were. And who I was being at work was not who I was being at home, and how I was educating myself and learning and practicing and investing in myself at work. I wasn't doing any of those things at home, Gary. And so I knew I needed help, and I had no idea what that help looked like. But it started that night by asking my wife for help. Please don't go. Please help. And to her credit, she closed the door. She stayed. Next day, I reached out to a friend and I said, what am I missing? Because you know this as a high executive coach that you are, Gary, you know that a lot of times problems that leaders come into is we can't see what's on the other side of the bottle. Everything from inside our little box looks rosy and great. And it's because we don't see the graffiti that's been sprayed around or the pain that's going on. And I know you talk about that on your Charge podcast, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy listening to it. And so getting that outside help, getting that perspective, I reached out to a friend and he pointed out some things that I wasn't seeing. And that led me to go, okay, there's obviously more I need to find out. And that's really what started this journey. But I couldn't abandon business. I still needed to provide for my family. So I then spent the next 8 years really diving deep, every workshop I could attend. And my wife, she would go with me. She would do these things, and she'd sit with other wives and they'd say, well, I'm only here because he's the problem. My wife went, look, we all need healing. We all need help. So I'm here for me. And we grew together. And then I was sitting in this group one night and I was so irritated, mostly with myself, if I'm being honest, but I was so irritated because these dudes were complaining about the same things that they complained about weeks ago and months ago. And I'm like, come on. Like, how long? If this was business, there's no way you let that fester for that long, right? Because then you're losing profits, you're losing clients. I mean, you take care of it. So I was super irritated. Why are we still doing this? So, little secret, Gary, I was mad at them because I was doing the same thing, right? So it's probably not a surprise to anybody, but it was to me at the time. So I started sharing some business principles because these were businessmen. And I said, hey, if this was a business, if this was a client that you're struggling with, if this was a customer, if this was a service delivery issue that you were struggling with, what would you do? How would you handle that at work? Oh, well, I would do this and I do this and I do this and I do this. And I said, okay, why can't you do that at home? And we start having this conversation and somebody pops up and they told me what I was afraid to hear. Joe, you cannot treat family like a business. Remember I brought up lies that we tell, lies that we learn. That's one of them. If you understand the principle, if you understand the underlying principle to your business success, you absolutely can transfer that to home. If you're a terrible leader at business, if you lead by fear, then yeah, you can't do that. But that's because you don't know how to lead the right way at business. So I started this process and I started to go, okay, well, what can I pull from business and how can I help that at home? And that suddenly meant everything started to connect, and it made everything so much easier. And I realized, Gary, not all men have the financial resources or the time or the patient wife as I did, patient spouse, because I know we've got our women listeners as well, that they are just as much a part of the home and a powerhouse to our families as the men are. But we don't always have that. So I thought, well, what about those that need a more immediate change that can't take the 8 years that I took? And that's where the 3D family framework came from. And that's why I'm doing what I am today.
Wow, that's awesome. I truly appreciate you sharing. It brings up so many questions that I want to dig into with you. But I think it really sets up the framework of why you're doing what you're doing. And we're going to try to break this down. And the thing I want people to realize that this will work for them, even if they're working for someone. Because we're talking about principles here that your framework that you've built. But I think it's really interesting. I want to kind of start there with is, why do you brought this up, to treat your family like a business? Because for some people, they're going to say, well, that's more transactional then, so that would look like it's very transactional. So I'm kind of curious, what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, there are elements of business that are transactional, but the best businesses are based on relationships. When you, Gary, think about your clients, your best clients, the people that come to you that you're able to have the big impact with that you do, it's because of those relationships. It's because of that connection. So yes, there's transactional elements to it. There's also transactional elements in family. It's a transaction when I drive my kids to school and drop them off, when I show up at a specific time and pick them up. That's a transaction. But really, when we get down to the core of everything, one of the things we want to look at, and one of the reasons why I say what you must treat your family like a business or a career, as you mentioned, is consider the amount of effort you put into learning business. You and I are not the skilled coaches that we are because we just showed up and started a YouTube channel or a podcast. We are who we are because of, there might be formal education. And there's many of us business owners or career individuals that we went to school for minimum of 4 years. Then if you've got a master's or a doctorate, you're looking anywhere from 6 to 8 to 12 years for some of our professionals that are in the law field or in medical field, things like that. So I didn't get a 4-year degree in my family. I wasn't dedicating that amount of time to getting a well-rounded education to study these different elements and pieces. And then I didn't go, you go to work every day and when you first start out, you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And you've got a boss or an intern or if you're the intern or a mentor. Hopefully in the best businesses, you've got somebody that's there to guide you, to give you that instruction so that when you face bumps, when you say something stupid to a client, and you lose a client and you're going, oh man, I'm such a failure. What was I doing? And somebody comes in and goes, hey man, it happened to me too. Like, what can we learn from it? You do that in business, you get better. Are we giving that, and you go to workshops, you do continuing education. So if I'm not giving that same level of dedication, that same level of consistent effort and investment to my family in always learning like I am to my business, there's no way I could ignore all of that in business and expect to succeed. There's no way, Gary. Absolutely. And Chargers, you all know this. You want to succeed in business. There's no way you could treat it like that and succeed. And yet we think it's going to work like that in our families. No, man, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
That's why we need to treat families like a business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because what we'll do, I just think about, I would read any business book out there. And probably one of the first books that my wife gave me on family that I can remember off the top of my head is Love and Logic.
Yeah.
And that was a book. And at the time, I'm kind of like almost taken aback. What are you giving me this for? I read business books. And, that was early in our career. But what a difference it made when we came on the same page with that philosophy, because they don't talk about, disciplining your children. Instead, it talks about consequences of your children. And our children, when they were younger, and one of them's going to be editing this podcast and he's going to shake his head at this. That's why you all did that. But we would talk about when they did something that was not appropriate, what did they think their consequence should be? And of course, if it wasn't strong enough as parents, you said, no, it needs to be a little more there. They started to catch on, but mom and dad still had rules to say, okay. And it was so amazing. So many times they came up with tougher than what we would have done. Well, I need to be without screen for the next week. Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We was thinking a day. But that's how you learn. And that's the key. You're learning together of creating that family dynamic. So that I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's the key is we have to realize we are their mentors, but we've got to learn as we go, because most people didn't get a manual that says, okay, I've got a child now. Here's what you do for the next 21 years.
But what if we do have that manual, Gary?
Exactly.
What if my manual is my degree? What if my manual is my 15 years of business experience and being a serialpreneur and building up all these differences? And what if that's my manual? What if I can take everything I learned from there and use that in family? Nothing's wasted. Nothing's wasted, Gary. You talk about what you learned in the Love and Logic book. Well, can't we apply that to employees?
Yes.
Instead of coming in and disciplining employees and I'm going to write you up. What if we sat down and had a conversation and said, hey, yeah, really disappointed in what took place. Let's talk about it. One, what can we learn? And two, what do you think the consequences should be? Yeah. Let's talk about consequences. What is that good leadership at business? I think it is.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So when you discover what it's like being a provider, what does that really mean? Because everybody uses that, especially males. We've got a stronger attachment to that because we think we need to be that provider. And it doesn't always mean the highest wage, but it's ingrained in us. And, my wife and I've had this conversation, I just have that ingrained in me, and we have to realize that. But what does that really mean by provider?
I'm glad you asked that, because that was probably one of the biggest turning points for me. And it's interesting you talk about being ingrained, because it doesn't matter if you hold a strong biblical perspective or if you hold a strong caveman Neanderthal evolution perspective. Either way, as men, there's this thing inside of us that says it is my job to protect my family, to provide for my family. So regardless of what avenue somebody wants to take, it's there. For me, the number one most important thing I learned about being a provider, and this is going to go, hey, Chargers, anything that you're looking at here, my Charger friends, this is important. You get to choose how you define it.
Mhm.
Okay. It is not defined by your parents and how you were raised. It is not defined by your pastor. It is not defined by your favorite Instagram influencer. It's not defined by Gary or me. It's this is something, and it's not defined by your boss. This is what you get to choose. So that was like, I don't know why I struggled with that so much. And I remember once that really hit me, like not just here in my head, but in my heart. When that really hit me, it opened up a whole new world, because it meant I could let go of all this, of everybody else's expectations. It's probably the best way to put it.
Yes.
Everybody else's expectations. So this is how I chose to provide, or to define being a provider. I am a provider of all things, physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, for my family. That definition of being a provider created freedom for me. Now, it may not. For you, Gary, for any of the Chargers that are listening, it may not create that freedom. That may feel more restrictive. It may feel like, oh, that's too heavy. I can't carry all of that. You know what? Here's the other thing. Here's the other secret about the definitions that you get to choose. If that's the number one thing, you get to choose these definitions. Here's the number two thing. They are living definitions that can change as you grow. Sometimes we worry about the values that we set. We worry about the definitions we create. We worry about the vision or the goals or whatever. And we never get to it because we say, well, I don't know if I'll like this 3 years from now. I don't know if I'll want to keep doing, Gary, when you started up your podcast 4 seasons ago, or 180 something, 90 something episodes ago, I mean, you don't start the podcast if you go, well, I don't know if I want to do 1,005 podcast. I don't know. I mean, maybe I should or shouldn't. No, you go, hey, this is something that where I'm at right now makes sense. So I'm going to do this. And then you continue to evaluate, again, just like in business, we continue to evaluate. We look at, am I on the right path? So choose your own definitions and realize whatever you choose today, it can grow as you grow. And that's okay. You have permission. Everybody's got permission. There you go. Boom.
Well, and it makes sense, because if we talk about going back, family, run it like a business, in a business, if you don't evolve over the 10 years, you're going to be left behind. Think about the last 10 years of how much business has changed. One, family life, it's changed because we've come on with technology. We've had technology in 10 years, but the last 20 years, it's totally evolutionized and changed things and those dynamics. And I love your concept there it's about that constant change. And it's really about life is being willing to change. And as they grow older, it was totally different when they're totally dependent on you, the old Franklin Covey dependence, then they want their independence, and then you want them to get them to interdependence, when they're babies, man, you've got to feed them, you got to change the diapers. Yeah. All those things. But man, they start getting a little more independent and they're able to walk and crawl and do other things. And it's like, you're starting to be activity with them. And then, of course, they become teenagers and they want their independence, but they're not there yet. And I have those 20-some-year-olds, and now there are more interdependent each day on their own life. So it really comes into play there, and you have to change and adjust as you go. And I love that concept. Joe, I appreciate you really sharing that.
Yeah.
So I guess,
cool?
Sure,
sorry, can I say something to that real quick?
Yes.
What's really cool about the example you just used, Gary, Stephen Covey, that's a business book.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a business book. And we also, if we tie it back to earlier in the show, when I talked about business and I start out, maybe I'm the intern and I have a mentor, I am dependent on my, I'm like, I don't really know where are the restrooms? Where's the break? I don't know where any of that is. Where's my cubicle? Whatever we're doing. So it's the same thing in business. But I love what you just did, because you took a business book and took these powerful principles, remember principles, and you just straight up applied it to family. I don't even know if you did that consciously or not, but I just want to point that out because that's a great example.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that. So the thing is, now the challenge we have though is some of us are hearing this and we know we need to make changes, but how do we start investing in our family before those challenges arise? Because there's still an opportunity for anyone, no matter what age they are. You have that opportunity. because till really you go to death, there's people there that on their deathbed, they wish they would have reconciled with their children as parents. And this becomes the key point, is how can they help reconcile? And let's hope it's not to that point for them, but wherever they're at in this, they may have a 5-year-old, they may have a 10-year-old, they may have a 15-year-old. It's different depending on what age that is, but you as a parent can make that change. And I love what you said, is you're not the victim, because I hear that too many times. They want to say, well, my childhood wasn't very good. I had some of them examples myself. I tried to change that, because you then can be that change agent. So what would you tell me there is, how can they invest in their family before the challenges arise?
All right. Well, there's so much there. I love that. That's so good. So first of all, let's all be honest. Challenges are already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
So it's not before challenges arise. There's different levels. Absolutely. There's different levels, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to wait until you're where I was and your spouse is walking out the door and you're sitting at the top of the stairs bleeding, whatever. Like, please don't wait that long. Don't wait until your kids are teenagers. Don't wait until they go away to college and you're paying tens of thousands of dollars for them to get indoctrinated with something that is not in line with your core values. Please don't wait. Now's the time. Look at what's going on. So that's first. Now, one is that we all have challenges. Challenges are opportunities based on perspective. But what I really want to do here is give some clear, actionable things that us Chargers can do. Okay. First one is, we must begin building our foundation now. You've heard the phrase, when was the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? When was the next best time today? Okay. So we can't start doing these surface level things until we just start treating that foundation. Now, to give a medical analogy, look, if I have some kind of internal thing or whatever, and what is it called? Good grief, I should have looked this up. I didn't know I was going to do this analogy, so here we go. But what is it called when somebody's blood doesn't clot properly?
Hemoglobin? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Clearly, I'll have to ask my daughter, because she wants to be in the medical field.
Clearly, my business success is not related to the medical field. But let's say I've got something that when I get a cut, that my blood doesn't clot, whatever that's called. Okay. There's medication that can be taken for that can help. Or you know what? Here we go. I just actually got blood work back. My cholesterol's high. So how about we go with that analogy? So I can take a pill that helps me internally, and that can give me some immediate relief. More importantly, I must begin addressing the foundation of my nutrition, my exercise, and my weight loss. If all I do is take the pill, it is treating the symptoms. That pill is helping me to have momentary relief so that I may build that foundation. So I want to give us Chargers two things. One, you must focus on your foundation, and you can start by creating your own definitions, like we talked about, with what does it mean to be a provider. Start with and other things you can look at. What does it mean to be a father, to be a dad, to be a husband? What does it mean to be a mom, a mother, a wife? What does it mean for me? I'm a Christ follower. What does that mean to me? For me, that doesn't mean I show up on Sunday and I'm super nice to everybody at church, and then I leave and I go get high and drunk and beat my kids. Like, that's, and hopefully it doesn't mean that to anybody, but so these are all, just come up with different definitions that you want to write. As you do that, you're going to see themes. Those themes become your values. So start tracking that. That's foundational work. That's where we want to start. And that's actually the first D in the 3D family framework. The other thing, we still need some immediate relief, right? If I've got high cholesterol and I start going to run on the treadmill at the gym, that could be bad. So we still need some immediate relief. Here's how you can get some immediate relief, Chargers. Okay. Ask better questions. Ask better questions. Let me give you an example. A bit ago, I was having a rough day. I wasn't sleeping good. I'd been eating a bunch of junk food, so I wasn't feeling very good. I was off. And I snapped at my kids, and I've got 3 younger kids, and I just got For me, it was snapping at them. I wasn't talking calmly. I was reacting instead of acting. And my wife said, "Hey, I can tell you need a breather. Why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you go sit in the other room? Just take a breath. I'll get the kids ready for bed." And she walked off, and I thought, what's wrong with me? Okay. So here's the thing, Gary, our subconscious mind, it goes, "Oh, we've got a question. We need to figure out the answer to that question." And it starts digging through all my files. And I'm telling you, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that there are things that are wrong with me. I mean, there's just as much evidence as to why I'm a great dad and why I'm amazing, but that's not the question I asked. And our minds don't filter it that way. So instead, what's a better question? And everybody, there's questions we're asking ourselves all the time to find a better question. In that case, a better question is, what do I need to change to connect with my kids while I'm putting them to bed? And then my mind's going to search for answers. My subconscious, everything's going to search for answers. The Holy Spirit's going to reveal to me answers from a Christian perspective. So here's another example. Show up for work and I go, "Okay, what do I need to get done today?" And then I think of everything I need to get done. And half of it's not even related to work. I'm thinking about how I need to go to the gym, how I didn't really help my wife with dinner or cleanup last night. And I need to do better for that. And I'm thinking of everything I need to get done, right? I'm thinking of, I need to get my will together. What does that have to do anything with about today? So ask better questions. What's a better question? Now at the start of my day, and I love the acronym CHARGE, by the way, Gary, create habits around real goals every day. Beautiful. So here's the habit. If I'm asking better questions, my goal is to ask better questions. So the habit is I pause. If I hear a bad question, I pause and go, "Okay, I don't like that. What's a better question?" Now, what I've done to change how I start my days, for me, the question is no longer, what do I need to do today? The question is now, what are the top 3 things God would have me do to move my business in the best direction?
That's good.
Anybody can steal that. Y'all can use that. You can adjust it, pivot it, whatever you want to do. But now I'm focused on the most important things instead of everything.
And that's the challenge we have, is because too many times we focus, just like you said, on everything, and then we get absolutely nothing normally accomplished. Think about that in your family. Think about that in your businesses. Joe, I think we could go for another hour. So I'm going to have to invite you back on the podcast, because I don't do that because our chargers are busy people too, but you've given them a lot of great information. I truly appreciate that. And I know you have some free material, because I know some of our chargers will want to take that. Will you share that, how they could get that link now to get those materials from you?
Yeah, absolutely. forwardwithjoe.com/charge.
Okay.
Go there. There's going to be, I'm going to put up some new stuff for your listeners. I'm going to put up, because we talked about values, we talked about definitions. I'm going to share my value sheet. There's some videos they can watch if they want, however they want to engage, wherever they're at to engage, they can go there. And then hit me up on social media platforms at the Joe Pomeroy. It's not arrogance. It was just consistency. And what I'd love to see, if people want to hit me up on social media and tell me a question that you're struggling with, and let's have a conversation about what's the better question. I'd love to help people with that. So they can absolutely hit me up and we'll do that.
Yeah. Connect with Joe, and we'll have all that. If you are exercising right now or driving, we have that all in chargepodcast.com and show notes. So we'll have that all available. So easy links. I know with our chargers, a lot of times they're active, because that's when I listen to podcasts, is you're doing something else. And it's like, yeah, I want that, but where do I get it? My son, Chris, actually does show notes and does a great job with show notes. So we'll have all that information there, as well as how you can connect with Joe. Joe, I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet. I've got 3 recharge round questions before we go that I want to make sure I get with you. And the first one is that charge, that create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think has led to success in your life?
You know, it's exactly what I hinted to earlier. The number one habit that has led me to success is to learn to ask better questions. It's impacted my mindset. It's impacted what I do throughout the day. Ask better questions.
Yeah. Noticed how Joe mentioned that it's not just that he's asking others those questions. He's asking himself those questions. It's both ways. I think both ways is so important because, with a child, when they come home and if you say, how was your day at school today? What are you going to get?
Good.
Fine, good, whatever, But if you ask, what was something that exciting that happened at school today? Or what did you learn today at school, depending on their ages, you're going to get a totally different response. And the same thing when we're talking about spouses. How many times do we just really don't ask a question? Instead, we more make a statement, and how we could open up our conversations with our spouses and significant others so much more. So thanks for sharing that, Joe. The next one is, I don't know if you enjoy going to the spa. I do. So I like acronyms, as you can tell. It's simple positive actions, the spa. What's a simple positive action you take to move forward on your goals every day?
Love that. Yeah. So this came from asking a better question. We hear all the time, you've got to know your why. Simon Sinek, start with why. You got to know your why. You got to put it on a paper and put it on your board. But what makes that powerful is connecting emotionally. And so I asked a better question. Instead of going, why can't I focus on my why? I asked a better question. How can I better focus on my why? And I realized it was through gratitude. Every night, walking up, putting our kids to bed, we do, all right, everybody shares something specific that they were grateful for that day. And it helps me to feel like my sacrifices, my efforts, my time are worth it, because it connects us as a family. And that gratitude just blossoms, and I want to do more and be more.
Yeah. And hearing that from children, that is it's pretty amazing. Sometimes what they say, it just lights you up inside, and I bet makes you sleep a lot better at nighttime.
Yes.
Now, the last one is, I share it as your biggest life lesson. And someone told me I've had a lot of big life lessons. So share a life lesson you would like to share with the audience.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because we always talk about these pivotal moments. And one life lesson for me, I always wanted that angel in the sky coming down saying, yes, it's all real. You're on the right path. So this life lesson that I want to share with our Charger family here is that it doesn't have to be a pivotal moment. I'm in Arizona, whether I'm driving to the Grand Canyon or I'm driving to the West Coast, East Coast, I cannot reach my destination by taking one single point the car in a direction, hit the gas. There are turns, there are pivots, there are critical moments, getting on freeways, off freeways, all of it. So it's okay. I learned that it is okay that I don't have one massive heavens open pivotal life-changing moment, because I have been gifted and continue to be gifted with many of them. And they keep me on the path that's best for me and my family.
Well, Joe, you've definitely shared with our audience, and I can't thank you enough for saying yes to the Charge podcast. This has been excellent, and we will have you back again, and we'll dig even deeper into it. But please connect with him. He's got some free material that he's sharing with the Chargers. forwardwithjoe.com/charge. And then we'll have all of his connections on Facebook. It's at the Joe Pomeroy, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We'll have all that in show notes. Joe, thank you again for making it a great day on this podcast today.
Thank you, Gary. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Chargers, the only thing I'm going to share with you, I think, is the very end that Joe said. Don't think about the biggest moment in your life. Think about the moments that you're creating each and every day, and that you're making that difference. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And one thing I would suggest to you, maybe you know someone else that needs to hear this podcast. Will you go to your podcast app, and there's 3 little dots there, press that. I learned this recently, so I've been sharing it all the time. And you can hit that, and you can share the podcast, go down to your text messaging, and it will send that into a text message form and say, hey, I just listened to this podcast. I really think you need to listen to it. You will make a difference in not only that person's life, but you could make it for generations when we're talking about family, because that's the difference we make. And that's what Joe shared was with today. Not just for you and your family that you make a difference, but think about your children's family and then their family. And you could change generations by sharing this podcast. And Joe, you've made that difference to us today. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Gary.
Chargers, We'll see you back here next week with another great guest. Make it a great day.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.